Alright guys, welcome back to another video. So we're continuing to work on the entryway table here, and the next thing we have to do is install our center panels here that are going to be what we actually screw our drawer slides to, and we'll kind of close off and separate our cabinets from our drawers. And in the first video where we're doing all of our milling, we put together these panels that we're not actually going to be able to use. Mostly because I think they look really stupid when I actually hold them inside, but I also, when I was gluing these up on this one piece, I missed the fact that there was a crack in it, and now it has spread almost all the way up. So if I was to install this panel, that crack would spread all the way through and this thing would probably just break itself apart. But the biggest thing is the visual looks, because these panels are just a bunch of pieces of wood that are just glued together. And so if we put them in here, they don't really look all that great. What we're gonna do instead is do some frame and panel work and make it match our outside. The benefit of that tongue and groove style paneling is that we can actually get it perfectly flattened like we did with the bottom panel here. That way we can still screw drawer slides to it, which is what we're gonna be doing on the kind of the middle section here. So we're gonna get to work on these panels because there is going to be a glue up and a decent amount of work we have to do in order to put them together. I think it's going to be really interesting to actually get these installed because, again, this is just going to be another one of those interesting changes that's going to happen to this piece of furniture throughout its development here. So before we go into the video, I just want to let you guys know that I recently started a Patreon page where I've got 3 different tier levels. If you join that top tier, you get free access to all my digital plans and SketchUp files, both for the current projects I'm working on as well as all my past stuff. As well as you get to be part of a monthly design session where you, me, and everyone else that's a part of that tier hang out over Google Meets, and we'll discuss some of the designs that I'm working on for future projects you're going to see on this channel. And if you're having issues with the design that you're working on, or you need some help with the project that you got going, you can feel free to ask those questions there, and you'll have me and this whole big support group to help you out. Just answer any of those questions, just give you some advice, all in person. You'll actually be able to see my face talking, which is an exciting thing. And if you want to support the channel another way, you can also go check out my merch on my website, like this hoodie I've got right here. But anyway, if you want to check out either my Patreon or my merch, there'll be links in the description as well as in the card up above. Okay, so we've got our panels fitting in here nicely, and if you can look closely, you can see there's a small gap at the top here. When I pull these top stretchers down so they're nice and tight up against the frame here, there's no more gap, which is exactly what we want. The important thing to understand anytime you're fitting a panel into a kind of a floating space like this is you never want to take your measurement only right here. You always want to take it at one of your outer edges, because those are going to be much more reliable, especially when you have horizontally oriented stretchers like this, so your grain is running wide across like that. These ones are going to bow or warp or do whatever they're going to do in the middle section, so it's not going to be a super accurate measurement. Whereas if you take your outer measurements from the outer edges, where they're tied in with those dovetails and they're kind of locked in place, that's going to give you a much more accurate measurement. So that's where I took my measurements for these panels, and they are now sized perfectly. So the one issue that we do have now is we have a small hairline gap right underneath the bottom of our panel, and because of the problems with my drum sander, it's not an even gap. So I can't just go in and easily shim it out. But I also don't want to, because if I was to try and sneak a shim in there, not only would it be kind of a pain in the butt to make, you'd also be able to pretty easily tell that there was a gap there that was filled. So what we're going to do instead is, because this panel that's underneath is just screwed in place, it's not glued in, all we're going to do is we're going to loosen those screws, put some shims underneath the panel until it sits perfectly flush here. So we're just going to sneak some shims in underneath this panel, and we're just going to work our way across, getting it perfectly flushed up with this front stretcher here all the way across. Now you might be wondering why I didn't do this before I started dealing with these panels and all that, and the reason is I only just thought of this. It was actually, I was explaining how to do it a different way, but then as I was talking about shimming out this panel, I realized that I could just put the shims under this section, and that would just bring it up slightly until we get everything nicely lined up. So that would definitely be how I would approach this again in the future, because that's a great way to work. Because this panel, it's way easier to get it nice and flat and all that, and get all of our joinery and that nice and cleaned up through the drum sander. But the drum sander, with its downsides to it, doesn't leave it at a nice even thickness. So now all we have to do is just go and shim it out, and shims are a completely easy thing to use. We just put them in underneath and we'll be good to go. Dividers in place, we're gonna get everything else set up for moving on to the next stage, which is gonna be our drawers and our doors. So before we get installing all that stuff, we want to do our easier things first. So I decided in these cabinet sections, I do want to add in some floating shelves, because I think it's just gonna make the area a little bit more versatile. If you want to keep some thin books or something at the top and have a larger section at the bottom, it makes sense. So I'm gonna be using my little Craig jig here, and we're gonna have to do some weird offsetting stuff, because especially to get onto our side panel here, we're gonna have to hold the jig onto the leg, then use a standard 1/4 inch drill bit, which is much longer than the one that comes with the jig here. To then drill our holes. So the spacing and all that should be the exact same. It should be no different. We just have to make sure that we're using a longer drill bit. I also decided that I'm going to change up my original design. In the original design, I had 3 drawers in our middle section here, and I'm realizing now that I think that's just going to be way too small. So this thought process is not purely design aesthetic. I found that in one of my cabinets, I actually had 2 sets of the perfect length drawer sides for this project. So rather than having to go all the way down to Lee Valley just to buy one more set, which is not only extra money, but a lot of wasted gas and all that, I decided to just go with 2 drawers, because I think that's going to be better use of the space. So we're going to get our holes drilled, we'll get our drawer slides mounted just so that way they're in there when we actually get on to moving on our drawers. That way, everything's already set up. Okay, so we've got our shelves all cleaned up. We flushed up the edges of that. And as you can see here, our shelf fits. Now, our shelf should not fit. So that tells me that there is something very wrong here. So as I've talked about a lot in the past, me and numbers and math in general just don't get along. So I've got all of my detailed measurements in that sitting right here. What I was planning to do for the shelves is I was going to notch them out so they'd be going around our legs. That way we'd get our maximum usable space out of the shelf. Now, what's happened is that we're far too short on the length. We're supposed to be 15 3/8 from the front to the back. We are just under 14 inches from the front to the back because I was looking at the wrong measurement on here. For the width, we're supposed to be 14 9/16, and I think we're 14 1/4, just somewhere around. But what works out kind of nicely is if I push the shelf right into the corner so it's nice and tight, on the side as well as on the back here, we end up with almost exactly 3/8 of an inch of gap there. So all that means is I have to add 3/16 of an inch of material to all four sides of this shelf, or both of the shelves, so that they fit precisely in between our front legs here and in between the two sides. And so one of the most important things in your woodworking is anytime you make a mistake, don't try and fix it in the most logical way. Because the most logical thing would be to try and hide that mistake. So you just glue on some ash around your outside edges, but the problem with that is that it looks like you're fixing a mistake. And that's never a good thing. If you make a mistake on a project, make it look intentional. That is one of the most important things to learn in woodwork. It's not about not making mistakes, it's learning how to fix them. And one of the best ways that I've found to fix mistakes is to make them pop, make them look intentional, make them become a design feature. So what we're gonna be doing with these shelves is just trimming the outside with a 3/16 strip of walnut. And what this will do is it'll just add a decorative feature. And it'll make it look less like a screw up and more like something that I was just a design feature I was trying out. I don't think it's gonna look particularly amazing having this walnut trimmed shelf in this cabinet area here. But for one, it's something you're never really gonna see. It's something that I can actually try, and if it does look good, then great. But the biggest thing is I just don't wanna make it look like a mistake. So if I was to put ash trim around the outside edges, it would look like I made a mistake, like I made the shelf too small. Whereas if I put the walnut around the edges, it looks like it was intentional, it looks like it's supposed to be there. So both shelves fit nice and tightly in each of their respective places. They're actually interchangeable, which is really nice. It means that I actually nailed it on the sizing of these two cabinet areas, which is awesome. The fact that I can make two, custom fit shelves and then just swap them back and forth just makes the piece overall way better. But yeah, what was a mistake in making these shelves too small has now become a very nice decorative feature with that walnut trim. Now you might be wondering how this works with wood movement, and it's one of those things where we're gonna find out one way or another. I don't think that it's gonna be an issue because our outer four pieces that make up the frame, those are all glued together, and there shouldn't be that much wood movement on this 1 3/4 inch wide piece that'll cause a break in this joint. But if it does, there'll be a slight gap between this side piece and this front piece, but all you're ever gonna see when this is being used as a shelf in the cabinet is this solid front piece. So even if wood movement does break the joints there, it's not gonna be a big deal because you're never going to see it or notice it. So even though it does look like I'm completely ignoring wood movement, I am considering it and making sure that even if the joint that I don't think is gonna fail fails, it's still not going to be an issue. And so that's gonna do it for this video, guys. In the next one, we're gonna get working on the drawers and the door. We're gonna get them all made, mounted, all that, get that part done. Then in the video after that, we'll get the top done. And then the final video of this project will be doing all of the cleanup, prepping everything for finish, and then using some of that tried and true stain across this whole project, which I think is going to make it look so much better. So as always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.